everyone, welcome to Book Blather. If you're new here, welcome to the party. I'm Dave, this is Olive, and we mostly talk about books and some other things. So today we want to tell you about a couple of books, short books that we read at the end of June. And so if you've been around, you may know that we are late bloomers in terms of our reading life. So we didn't start reading in earnest till later on in life. And, we read all sorts of stuff. And so, because we're late to the game, sometimes sometimes we're a little embarrassed, right, about things that we think we should have read by now. We think that everybody's already read this stuff by now. For example, we like science fiction, right? We haven't read Dune. That's a project for later this year. We like fantasy. We have not read Lord of the Rings, right? And so we're always embarrassed to admit this. And, but the reality is, right, it's that's why we like talking about these things that we haven't experienced yet, is because we know there are other people out there too, right? There are more of you. It's not just us that haven't read some of these things, that are maybe a little embarrassed, haven't read it yet. And the thing is, there's no reason to be embarrassed about it, right? There's a whole bunch of other people that also haven't read these books that you've been thinking about, and it's never too late to read them, right? So we do like, fantasy, sci-fi, horror. We talk about that stuff a lot, but we also read everything else. And so there's a lot of other things. Like lately we've been thinking about some classics, right? And one is we have never read any John Steinbeck, right? And even though we know he's supposedly one of the greatest American authors of all time, right? And written some well-known big classics, Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden. We have never tried Steinbeck before. And we're like, we should try it, right? And sometimes we think some of these old things, maybe they're going to be a little stuffy or boring or whatever. If you are like us and you have not tried John Steinbeck yet, you need to try John Steinbeck. So we finally did it, and we finally read two of Steinbeck's short novels, right? So we actually inherited this book from my daughter, the short novels of John Steinbeck. And a couple of people had said to us recently, like, you got to read Mice and Men, you got to read Mice and Men. So we finally did it. We finally broke down and read Mice and Men last month. And so it's in this one. This one has Tortilla Flat, Of Mice and Men, The Red Pony, The Pearl, Cannery Row, and The Moon is Down. And so we didn't have Mice and Men in another. This is the only place we had Mice and Men, so we had it handy, and so we read it. And Mice and Men was amazing. We give recaps for these books in case you're like us and you didn't really know much. You didn't know what they're about. So I really didn't know anything. I went in pretty blind. Other than that, I heard it's one of his greatest novels. And what Mice and Men follows is there's these two friends, George and Lenny, right? And they're two migrant workers looking for work during the Great Depression, right? And so they go from like farm to farm, looking for work. And I guess at that time, a number of the characters comment that it's customary you don't usually see pairs of men walking around, migrating from farm to farm. It's usually individual guys that are out looking for work and moving around. So everybody thinks it's unusual. These two are together. And Lenny is he's a big guy. He's great at work. He's a great worker, but he's mentally disabled. And George is basically, he's his friend and somewhat of his caretaker, right? And so George sticks with Lenny, and they have a very, unique relationship. You need to pick me up. We got to start doing these earlier, right? Right. And they have a very unique relationship, and Lenny. So George is not. So they had just left wherever they had been, and where something happened, they kind of had to get away from there quickly, and you don't really know what it was. And so they come to this new farm, and they meet a bunch of different, characters at this new farm. They get hired there, and we see the basically nature of their relationship. Lenny George pretty much directs things, and George doesn't always say super nice things to Lenny. Sometimes he'll be like, I got to tell you again, you forgot this thing already that I just told you. You never remember what I tell you, you know? And so he says sometimes he speaks to him and not in the most patient of ways, but you can see that underneath that, George really, really cares about Lenny. And that is why they're still together, is because George just, he wants to help Lenny, he wants to help Lenny get by, and he wants to help Lenny, navigate the difficulties that he's having. So, a lot of times they go to get new work, he'll speak for Lenny. He won't let Lenny talk because he doesn't want Lenny to ruin it, and he'll, so that he'll kind of use his smooth talking to get the job for both of them. And so, and Lenny's always, Lenny has a really, really big heart. On the inside, but he's this gentle giant, right? So because he's big, he's not always so gentle, and sometimes he does he does certain things that he can't help it, and so they travel together, and George tries to help steer him in the right way, and Lenny, they have this fantasy that they're going to get their own farm one day and raise rabbits, because Lenny really, really wants to raise rabbits, and George is always keeps reaffirming this dream that they have. And so it's a very it's a very neat relationship that these two have, and they go to this farm, and things happen, and so I can't really say anything else, but it was a great, great novel. I was so happy that I read it finally, and it is one of the saddest things that I've ever read. And so it was one of those things like, I can't believe it took me this long to read it, but glad I finally did. Never too late, right? So I finished that, and I'm like, okay, I like Steinbeck, so I got to read some more, and I have all these short novels here. So let me try another one. So Mice and Men was published in 1937. So next we read then The Moon is Down. And I happen to have this it's in here, but I happen to have it in this Penguin Classics version because, whenever, we go to a lot of used book fairs and shops and stuff. So whenever I see like a good quality Penguin in the wild for cheap, I pick it up. If it's something that there's a chance we might read, right, Olive? Either that I might read or you might read. And so I pick it up if either one of us might read it. And so I just happened to have this, Moon is Down. So I read it in this version because it's easier to hold. And this was, I especially wanted to read another one just because I really liked it. But also, Mice and Men was told in very, a lot of it was dialogue, right? And these guys spoke like broken English, right? So that was most of the book. So I'm like, I'd really like to read one of his books where I just get to see like just his usual writing is showcased and see what that's like. So that was this. The Moon is Down. This was published a few years later in 1942. And this book is about an occupation of it's clearly meant to be a Nazi force, but there's an unnamed European town that becomes occupied by this hostile force, which is clearly intended to be the Nazis, even though they don't say that. And this book was actually was written by Steinbeck as a piece of anti-Nazi propaganda, and it was spread. It was bootlegged a lot and spread throughout Europe a lot during the war. It was a very effective piece of anti-Nazi propaganda, and it was very, very widely circulated at that time. And this also was a really, really good book. This tells us this occupying force comes into this town. So it's a small town, and there's somebody relatively important business wise in the town is basically a sympathizer. They're basically betray the town. They're a sympathizer to the occupying force, and they kind of lay the groundwork, and they make sure anybody that can kind of round up any kind of resistance is out of town when it happens. So town only has a few, so they have like 6 soldiers. It's not very much, and then like a couple policemen or whatever. And so he makes sure it's prepped, and they're not there, and this force comes in. So there's a little bit of violence, but they take over the town relatively unviolently, and then they occupy it. And so the leaders of this occupying force, there's a colonel and a couple lieutenants and stuff. They move into the mayor's house, this Mayor Orden, and they try to have a cordial relationship. They do have a relatively cordial relationship with him. But the book is interesting because it really illustrates the hardships for both sides of this sort of occupation. You get to see the difficulty that the town's residents have, right? Because they're not able to mount armed resistance, so they kind of just resist in a very cold, silent way, which is further emphasized by the fact that like winter comes on and the weather makes things worse and dreary, and so they kind of offer this kind of it's hard for them, right? Because they can't violently resist, but they can't accept this occupation either. And then at the same time, you have the occupiers, and we see a lot about the occupiers and the discussion among the occupiers and their discussion with the mayor and the toll it starts to take on them over time, because some of them don't really even want to be occupiers, and they have to live here with these people that hate them, and they want to get along with these people because they live there with them, but they can't. And so, or they try, and people on both sides try a little bit, but obviously it's a hostile relationship. And some about the politics, like the colonel of the invading force and the mayor of the town are both very intelligent, very rational men, and they both try to have rational discussions about how to get through this. And the colonel wants the mayor to do certain things because he thinks the town folk will be more receptive to it if it comes from the mayor, and the colonel doesn't want to exert any violence or have to make any examples or anything. Doesn't want to have to do that. But then the mayor is at the same time. The mayor's like, the mayor's trying to be rational about things, but he's like, I don't know what the town folk will do in this situation. I don't know what they'll do in that situation, and I can't do these things that you're asking me. If you ask me to do the things that I'm doing, I will lose the relationship with the town folk, and they will no longer trust me. And will not be able to achieve the objective you're trying to achieve by using me to do it. So it's very interesting. There's an awful lot. You can see it's not very long, but there is an awful lot that's packed into this very short book. It's done really well. And we get to see a lot. We get to see a fair bit about the mental state of a lot of different characters. And there are other towns. It's not just the multiple soldiers or leadership of the occupying force, but also multiple people around the mayor, not just the mayor. And so we get to see the mental state of a number of different people and the hardships that it works on both sides. And to be honest with you, the book doesn't have like a very clear resolution at the end of it, but it's basically not resolved at the end. You just kind of see how things transpire during a certain period of this occupation. But there also seems to be, as I said, it was used as a piece of anti-Nazi propaganda, and I think a central message of the book was also that it is really hard on the occupying force too. So this sort of underground, sort of more quiet, non-overt resistance is actually effective because over time it does wear on the individuals in the occupying force, because at the end of the day they are people. They are individuals as well. So this was really good. It was really well written, really good character development, very, very quickly, and just a really good presentation of the wear and the weight on both sides of an occupation like this. So excellent book, and so I would highly recommend this as well. So. Yeah, so that was too. This was just had some time at the end of June, and so we thought we would devote that to these couple Steinbeck classics, and we're gonna try some more. So there's like some of those like East of Eden and Grapes of Wrath. They're pretty long, but he's got a bunch of short ones too. He's got a lot of novels, and so we're gonna try probably a few of the shorter ones first. Try some more of his stuff because clearly we like John Steinbeck, and we did not know that until this past month. So I hope that's a lesson for anybody else that hasn't tried Steinbeck or anything else you've been waiting to try. It's not. Don't be embarrassed about the fact that you haven't tried it yet, and it's not too late. Pick it up tomorrow, and try it. Yeah. So let us know if you're a Steinbeck fan, you've read these books, or let us know if you have any thoughts on them. I think. Oh, we got one more for you. One more for you. Did you have anything else to add about these Steinbeck books? No. No, you've been pretty quiet lately. You haven't been saying much, but nothing. Nothing. Okay. So yeah, so let us know. We always love to hear from you. So leave us a note in the comments below, or if you don't have anything substantive to say, you can always leave Olive a puppy emoji because she does always like to see those. So, as always, guys, thanks so much for watching. We will see you again very soon. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you next time.